Welcome to a design workshop for non-designers in free and libre open source software. It's okay if you're also a designer, you're very welcome here. But the idea of this workshop was created, many iterations of it, created after I had gone to, and I think Abhishek as well, gone to many open source conferences and contributed to projects, and people have asked how does design work in open source, or how can it work in open source? And I would give like these impromptu, quick digests of how to do design in open source for, or how to welcome designers into open source as well. And then decided this should be a workshop and a series of resources. So you can find this set of slides and all of the other resources on a big open whiteboard via the link here. So if you want to get a big version of the link, it will be on every single slide from here on, but a little bit smaller. But if you want to record it now, just so that you don't lose it later, you will always be able to access this board. We have made a backup as well, so don't worry if you accidentally delete something from the board. We have done version control. But yeah, let's get into it. Hello, I'm Errol. This is me. My pronouns are they, them. You can find me not on X anymore. Yes. You can find me on Mastodon. I'm there as Errol Does Design. I've been doing stuff in design across many different job titles for over 10 years, closer to 12 years now. I've been doing a lot of that work, design work in the humanitarian and human rights sector for around 7 years, as well as in open source software. And I am a senior designer, product manager specifically for open source product manager at Superbloom. And I also somehow managed to find time to do a PhD as well, part-time, about how design is done in open source software tools that have a humanitarian and a human rights focus.
Hey everyone, I'm Abhishek. I'm a senior designer as well at Ubuntu, and my background is like contributing to a lot of projects in UI UX and managing some open source projects as well. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to quickly restart. I'm Abhishek. I'm a senior designer at Superbloom, and my background is in contributing to projects via UI UX and managing open source projects as well. Yeah, and I have also been working with nonprofits and in human rights space as well. Okay, that's us.
A little bit about Superbloom, who are always happy to send folks to open source conferences to talk about design and the kinds of things that we do. But we would be doing them a disservice to not talk about what we do. So we are a design nonprofit. We are, I always forget this US thing, which is 503C, 5013C, something, nonprofit registered in the US. We operate in the intersection of design work across the spectrum of design work, which may mean more to some people than others, but all different kinds of design in the human rights, civic tech, public interest technology space. We intend and work really hard to use design as a method to shift power in the tech ecosystem. Technology has historically had a lot of power centralized in a lot of spaces like big tech, which we don't necessarily think is always the best way to operate at Superbloom. So we use a lot of design processes to try and shift that power in the tech ecosystem. We like to center, well, we think it's essential to center people and their needs within the technology that is built. We collaborate closely with a lot of other people in this space to grow community-focused ways of shaping digital future. We used to be called Simply Secure. So if you know-ish what we did, Simply Secure will be a slightly more familiar company name than Superbloom. We rebranded last year. And if you're really curious as to how an open design process for rebranding an organization goes, we've got blog posts on our website about how we engage the community to rebrand, as well as how we do our work. TLDR, rebranding openly in an open process takes a long time, as many things in the open take a reasonably long time. These are some of the projects that we've done over the years. We've worked with the Web Foundation to combat deceptive design, often known under a different term, which we're trying to deprioritize, called dark patterns. So we're trying to move to deceptive design to remove the connotation of dark and bad. But we did a series of workshops and resources about how to move towards trusted design instead of deceptive design. We created a series of resources, which we named User Testing Can Be Fun. And this was centered around developers of open source privacy security tools that wanted to understand how to do user testing with users more collaboratively. So there's a lot of resources and guides on how to conduct user testing in a sustainable way, even if you're a small team of developers working on a tool. We did a big study with the Sloan Foundation on how to understand how usability and design is better or done currently in scientific and research open source software and how that can be improved. And we also produced a toolkit for funders to better understand and support usability and design as critical infrastructure. So a lot of funders tend to focus on things like security or other aspects of infrastructure as funding, but not the usability of how their tools are constructed. So we've got a toolkit for funders to better understand that. Welcome. Yay, welcome. The kinds of things that we'll be using in this workshop, we've got paper pens. If you don't have paper and pens, I would recommend that you find some. I think there's paper and pens at the front of the door. We've also got big paper and pens here if you want to work big. We can access some sticky notes if you want to use sticky notes, and we've got some templates as well. We'll also be using Miro, which is sadly not open source tool, for these slides and this digital open whiteboard with all the resources you can use afterwards. If anyone knows of an open source alternative to Miro, we are actively looking for one that works as well. We're trying out Excalidraw, but it does not sadly work as well. We may end up using GitHub or GitLab or other repository areas to share and investigate open source software projects and issues. And we're going to work in teams. We might sort of have 2-ish teams or maybe pairs. And we're going to encourage you to work with people that you don't already work with or haven't worked with before. Showing the Miro comments, funny. What we're going to cover today in the 90 minutes, we're going to briefly do some more talking about what design is from our perspectives in open source. We're going to ask you all to talk about the tools that you work on or are involved with so that we can work on those during the workshop. So anybody that feels particularly extroverted and wants to talk about their tool, in approximately 10 minutes or 15 minutes time, get prepared to come up here and talk about your tool or your open source. We've got a couple of different exercises. The first one that we're going to do is around something called value proposition statements. We can do that solo or in groups. It's however you want to do that. We have stakeholder personas that we're going to work on, or contributor personas. Another way, we're going to have a little break at a point that feels right. And then you're going to talk about common challenges faced by designers in free and libre open source, including different kinds of people, right? And then the last exercise, which I sadly won't be here for, is user journey mapping. I've got to go catch my flight. It is my wedding anniversary today, so I should go spend some time with my partner. So apologies for not being here for the latter half, but Abhishek will take you through user journey mapping. So why have design in open source software? So design in open source is not new by any means, and designers and those that work on the design of open source software tools, they've been around since the beginning. They might not have called themselves designers, but there has been design in open source happening since its existence. They may have called themselves, if they call themselves something other than the developers or maintainers or creators of these open source tools, they may have called themselves things like usability experts or maybe human-computer interaction researchers or experts. But other people that have been interested in how open source software tools are used and used better exist throughout the entire spectrum of open source. But I've noticed in the last however many years I've been in open source that the trend in increase of design for open source and in open source has become a lot clearer. It's become a lot more prevalent for designers to want to contribute to open source, and a lot more interest from the design side to make contributions, as well as design of all of its different kinds, which we'll talk about in a moment, being requested and understood and is an important part of how we build software generally, and open source software is part of that. So lots of people are getting on board with design as a process and design as a practice as part of all different types of technology projects. So this is, for those of you in the room that aren't familiar with all the different kinds of design that can be done, I try to explain and categorize two different types of design, although that's fairly crude, I would say. It can be a lot more complex than this, but this is a reasonably easy way to categorize two different kinds of design. So the first kind of design we call capital D design. So that's the design of the parts you can see. So you could describe that as GUI, graphical user interfaces, visual design, graphics and logos. Or also, I've described capital D design as design executables. So something which looks like or functions like something which can be tangibly seen and contributed. So something which is much more like, that's design. And a lot of people can agree, that's design. The definitions of what design is are varied and evolved throughout our industry. Today's definition of user experience design or UX design might change depending on the organization, the geographical location, the makeup of a design team. And so different methodologies and different best practices can be done in different spaces. So as you embark on your journeys around design in open source, be aware that this can look and sound different from different people in different places. So be open to the way that designers define the work themselves when they come into your projects. So this is often why design and designers can be changeable or sometimes vague. If you've experienced and worked with designers before, sometimes those definitions will change from individual to individual. So you might work with a designer on a piece of work at one point, and then maybe even the same designer at another point, and maybe something has changed in the industry, or a new practice has evolved, or they want to try a new process that is either more defined or more inclusive or otherwise. But the best thing that you can do is give them the chance to clarify and talk about individually what they want to do and how they want to do it openly. So ask them things like, how do you practice design? How do you think design could be best practiced in this kind of open source software, given these things which I can inform you about or tell you about or work with you on? What's worked well in projects that you've worked on before? Have you experienced design to work particularly well in other open source software tools that are like mine? And then what processes got you the directions and results that you wanted? We often hear from people that don't identify as designers that they think design is limited to or primarily focused on things like visuals and graphics and logos and UI. And that's the tangible aspects of design. And what we found over the years is that tends to be what is more valued in open source software projects, because it's what I can describe as closest to code that successfully functions or code that successfully runs. I can see a design and I can see these things in a UI that meet certain needs of the users. So it's the closest thing. Oh, that's not the right slide. Hang on 2 seconds. gone out of order. Okay. So there's an error on this slide. So this should be the lowercase d design. What I just talked about was lowercase d design, lower d. Right. Apologies. So those are the tangible things. So now we're going to talk about the harder to see aspects of design. So the capital D design. So the lowercase d design is the executables, the UI, the things that are easier to understand, tangible. Capital D design is the harder to see side of things. It's the research, it's the thinking, the conversations, collaborations, facilitation, interpretation, intuition from hypotheses, and the application of widely gathered design knowledge. This is the problem when you have like a capitalized version of a word and a lowercase version in your explanation. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that is incredibly hard to contribute to open source software projects, but really benefits them when it is contributed. So it's incredibly hard to, say, push or contribute a piece of design research. And this is why it's largely absent. And I rarely see capital D design research being done in open source. It really doesn't help that in the commercial proprietary world, that kind of work is really hard to see as well. So it's not like the software companies that are not building open source or building other things show that kind of work openly either. So generally in the world, we don't see a lot of the design research. So how could we possibly expect a lot of open source to see it either? Designers themselves are not really encouraged to openly share their practices and openly share their research. Often it's what we are taught to be like our secret thing. Otherwise, we won't get hired if we give away like how we do our research. It's our secret sauce. And if we open it up and we share it with open source, for example, then how will we kind of be credibly hired in other kinds of spaces? So it's kind of the thing that has protected us in a lot of ways, not sharing those kinds of things, in ensuring that we have like careers, essentially. So when you come across designers in open source and they're a little bit, say, nervous and cagey about sharing how they do their processes, remember it comes from a historical devaluing of design as like a critical function, but also that is the thing that we are taught to reveal at the end as our like end sellable product, essentially. Designers are getting more comfortable opening up their processes, and they have a lot of tooling that supports that now. So I don't want to really talk about Figma, but it does have collaboration tools in it. Penpot has a lot of collaboration tools in there as well. But still, a lot of these tools for designers are also focused on the lowercase d design, like the visual things, the things that are more tangible. So even in our tooling, we aren't given the tools necessarily to actually openly share these kinds of things. Most of the time, the lowercase d design, like the visuals, the GUI and things like that, whether or not a designer will show them or talk about them, there's a lot of the design research, the capital D design that happens beforehand. So there's a lot of hypothesis generating, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of insight, information gathering as you try and understand what your design executables will be like. But it's so invisible, it's not widely shared. But it will exist with the lowercase d, easier to understand design. Today, we are going to do a lot of capital D design. We're going to do a lot of design research. This is what we're going to concentrate on. So anybody that came here expecting to maybe learn how to build UI, not necessarily, not at all what we're going to focus on, but you will get the foundations for how designers make decisions on how to build UI. So you're not skipping any steps this way. It's really good because this kind of understanding helps you then support designers that are contributing UI. So these are the skills that are really essential for when designers come in to contribute UI or contribute visual design. You can actually be a friend to them and say, hey, how did your design research or insight gathering go? I've done some myself. And they'll be like, amazing, a friend. So it's a good foundation to come from. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think this is the last part of this before, oh no, wait, we're going to ask some people to come and talk about their tools. What designers should be expressing in every kind of aspect of how they do design, even if they don't talk about it widely, is being user advocates. We are focused on ensuring that the open source software's user needs are being met in a way that most works for them. So that the challenging part of that is not, it might not always be the technical answer to a problem. Sometimes it's about refining and clarifying and exploring alternative pathways or hacks that users use. So often when I've done design in open source, the one of the biggest parts of my roles is trying to make sure that the voice of the users are being heard and understood and best represented in whatever the technical implemented solution ends up being. So designers are there to do that translation process from how the user actually does something to how the technology needs to express that and how it's designed for. Also, there's an aspect of balancing, like you can call it business wants and stakeholder needs, among other needs as well. So designers don't just solely focus on the user voice. It might be about what does this organization want to achieve, as that balances with the user needs as well. So designers have got a lot of things to think about when they're doing their processes. Oh, sorry. Why should open source care about design? Plenty of reasons. Why you should care, open source software should care about design. We're going to dive into some of the deeper reasons based off of like personas, and we're largely going to explore design research methods through understanding designer contributors and mapping their pathways into the open source. So we're not only trying to help you learn and teach the methods of design research, we're doing it in a way that hopefully will get you closer to understanding what a design contributor needs from your project. So we're kind of trying to do two goals at the same time, teaching you methods and also giving you content about designers. We have briefly talked about our own experiences. Abhishek, is there anything that you want to add before we ask some folks to come and talk about their tools? We might need 2 volunteers for this group.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, folks, I need 2 people to come and talk about the things, the open source software that you work on, maintain. We're going to focus on 2 of those, and we're going to split you into 2 groups, and you're going to work on those two projects with these exercises. I see some people moving. Yeah, come and talk about your project. Could you? And I need 1 more. Please do. Yes. Ooh, half an hour. Yes. Sorry. Please, in a couple of minutes, if you can explain what your tool is, what it does, you'll get into deeper conversations with people.
Right. So.
Oh, microphone.
So what I'm working on is on publicly verifiable e-voting systems for underpowered communities and organizations. The problem today is that e-voting, publicly verified e-voting, like e-voting systems in Estonia, are hard to deploy. So you need one needs multiple independent servers, which needs to collaborate, but it still needs to remain independent in the election process. So every voter can be assured that their vote is not revealed publicly. This is how it's achieved. There are 2 pieces of technologies. One is that instead of anonymizing votes after the votes are cast, instead voters' public keys, their pseudonyms with which they cast the votes, are anonymized beforehand with the help with different independent servers, verifiably using industry standard zero knowledge proofs of shuffle and decryption. And other piece of the technology, which is important, is history tree proofs. History trees are type of Merkle trees, which allow efficient constructing efficient inclusion and consistency tree proofs. And this is important because these two technologies combined allow e-voting system to be deployed on a single server without need allowing lower prepared or smaller communities which doesn't have already large resources to allocate for e-voting systems to deploy these systems, and these are offered even more security than those which offer more transparency and offer more anonymity opportunities and offer also new types of ballot types which can be supported.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to
yes.
move over. That sounds great. I got a good understanding of the tool. If I can swap you over, and you can and you can sit back down.
I'll take this out. Easier for everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm the maintainer of a open source project called Owncast, which is a free and open source self-hosted live video streaming server. So at its most trivial, you can kind of think of it as a open source self-hosted Twitch kind of. So video streaming and chat and integrations with third parties. There's the whole user section, which you see, and then there's a whole admin section, which you don't see, and only the streamer has to deal with that stuff. So generally the admin section gets no attention and everything is mostly on the user side, and the streamers just have to deal with it. Design is one of our largest challenges for a lot of these reasons that were mentioned today. A lot of people want to do lowercase d design when big features and big initiatives need uppercase design. So I think that's the project in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming up. I know it's like terrifying in a workshop when it's like, and I want the audience to come and talk about their things. Okay. So we also had some example projects, but it's great that you've brought projects with you, because sometimes people are nervous and don't want to talk about their projects. So we bring examples, but we don't need those. So the first thing that we're going to work on in teams, and we're going to kind of go this kind of team of 4, if this is okay. And then we're going to do a team of 3, if this is okay. Cool. So the first thing that we're going to work on, I would recommend that each of you take a template for value propositions. And the person that is running the project, you're going to find yourself probably doing a lot more talking in this exercise. And the people that, the other people with the templates, you're going to want to be in like question asking mode to that project maintainer, right? So I want you all to have a go at this exercise. So this is called value propositions, and this is an amazing exercise for any open source software tool to go through themselves, but also with the community. Because what this exercise does is it reveals really quickly what different members of your open source project value and understand about your tool. So you can do this with other maintainers, you can do this with users, you can do this with community members, and you gain insight into what they want and think how something should function really quickly and easily. So a value proposition, and I really encourage you to put versions of this on your like repositories documentation, or even like create an issue that just receives value proposition statements like from community members as a piece of like research gathering. But it's a simple and clear statement. It communicates the unique benefits of any product or service and sets it apart from another similar product or service, or just kind of gives it a simple, clear statement. It should be clear, concise, easy to understand. Highlight the key benefits of the product the open source service offers. Explain how these benefits will meet the needs and solve the problems of the target users. So the components are, I hope it's okay that I walk and roam. Okay, great. The components are the product tool or name. So we've got an example here from Sino Browser. If people don't know Sino Browser, it is a mobile browser app that's open source for journalists, activists, and everyday citizens to access and share web information in and across regions where connectivity has been interrupted or compromised. It's a censorship circumvention open source software browser tool. But this is what we're trying to get to. So we're trying to get to a clear description of what it does, and then think about how this might be used in your community and gathering like more insight from different people and different users. There's one, before I set you off on this task, I'll keep the example up. But before I set you off in this task, I want to kind of highlight one thing that isn't great about this example. So this everyday citizens, incredibly broad, huge. Are we designing something for every single person in the world ever? Well, probably it's going to be really difficult. So I really encourage you to avoid very broad definitions. So things like, I would even request that you think about even more specific things. So maybe it's not just streamers, it's video game streamers, and you define what the tool needs to do specifically for video game streamers or people that are streaming code tutorials. For the voting platform, you might want to describe different people that have different kinds of levels of access to voting. So people that are in locations where it's harder to vote for them because of oppressive regimes. So yeah, being specific. And you can do multiples of these. I would encourage you to do multiples of these for different kinds of users or different kinds of purposes. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Go for it. Where's the timer? Amazing. Mira has like an inbuilt one. Oh, cool. Your clock will go off before mine, so. Oh, amazing. That sounds great. And maybe I'll just hold it. Yeah. Sorry about this. Yeah. And then we'll move straight on to stakeholder engagement. Oh, if you also give that what minutes are we on? Okay. You have a minute left. If you haven't started writing, start writing now. I just heard the cuckoo. If you want to finish what you're writing. Everyone's deep into it. This is the problem with design workshops is like, as soon as you start an exercise, people are like, I need to finish this. Good work. Yeah. Love it when people are like, yes, I've finished. I'm putting down my pen. Okay, I'm going to be really strict now. I love my favorite thing in design workshops is when I stop talking and you all talk about stuff, because that's, you're already doing design research. So I prefer to have a workshop where I did zero talking, and you all worked on cool stuff. But we're time-wise, we're going to move on to the next exercise really quickly. I would love afterwards if you all wanted to talk as a group about how you think this exercise could like work for your open source projects, like putting the template out there and sort of seeing what contributions you'd get just from this, I think is really cool. But we're going to look at contributor personas now. Abby, will you? So we've got a few different examples of persona documents that we've written. And if you're unaware of what persona is, like quite a common word now, I think a lot of people have either had good experiences with the word persona or bad experiences or mixed experiences with personas now. But if you didn't know what a persona is, it is a fictional, or it should be a fictional amalgamation of demographic information created as a design tool or a product tool to ensure a project stays on track for the needs of the users or stakeholders. That's the purpose of a persona. It's not there to be like a very incredibly rigid, like we have to make sure that every single persona is like written about. We have to ensure that this persona is, when we build this feature, this exact persona is being met at every level. Is to help us guide and understand the needs. These are always usually and should be rooted in experiences and wants of real people. So these personas we've written ourselves, which are rooted in experiences and wants of real people. And they're best created when they're selected at random from like a diverse pool of demographics of people that you understand things about. So personas are drawn from multiple sources, not tied to a specific person, and to be kept in mind during the entire process of design. So the capital D research and the lowercase d GUI, UI, visual side of things is really useful to keep these in mind. This short story, I'm going to shorten even more. It tells a story of when an open source project was being worked on, and that there was a specific feature around test automation, mentorship in test automation, and the they were trying to understand a junior developer persona, essentially, that was a contributor, that was new to the open source software, that was looking for mentorship in test automation, and that had a lack of understanding and the best practices of the open source tool, and predominantly non-technical. This is what they thought a junior developer was, but they were incorrect. And they sent out surveys and did hypotheses, had a lot of different replies with this open source software tool, that they then changed their understanding based off of this persona research, that the users, even the junior developer users, were predominantly well experienced, wanted to streamline their efforts, and wanted to mentor and not mentor other people and not receive mentorship. So there was like this misunderstanding of what this junior developer persona was. And that's research. Doing that process is doing design research. So what we're going to do, in the interest of time, we have four or five different personas that are potential contributors to open source, 3 of which are designer personas. So what I want you to do for the next 10 minutes is to take a look at these different personas, and then there's a question, just a template for questions afterwards. So we want you to have a look at these personas, think about the projects that you're focusing on, and we want you to think around the questions around who wants to use. Imagine one of these personas, you can focus on one of them. Imagine one of these personas came into your project as a contributor. Is this someone who wants to use and contribute to your project, or use or contribute to your project? What troubles might they face? How do your assumptions change about them reading the information based off of the persona? Does anything need to change in your project in order to welcome them as a contributor? And there's other questions on the question sheet as well. There are other questions here, which are things like, have you met someone like this before? How would you welcome this person into your open source project? What's the first step that you would take? How would you make them feel welcome, and things like that? So you want to work on this question sheet. You can read through the personas, and you can focus on multiple or one of them to respond to the questions. And you have, let's give you a little under 10 minutes, actually. I think you're a fast group. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. I got the timer here. Oh, you beat me? Okay, I'm going to put 7 minutes on my time. Yeah, for the full version, it would be like, here's your persona. Yeah, just do one of them. Do you want to have a break after this? No, I think we can leave. People can get water if they want. Maybe if we have enough time, we can ask for folks to report back. I think we will have enough time. For folks to maybe just say a really quick piece. And then we will go straight here to your bed. You good? This microphone. Yeah, cool. We'll use that. We'll use that for the report back. They've got another 4 minutes. So we're gonna allow them to use this one and we're gonna listen in. I think this was part of the video. Yeah. We'll say my taxi to the airport is going to be late. It's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm not worried. You have 1 minute left. 15 seconds. Okay, folks, finish up the conversation you're having. The microphone is going to come to each of your groups. Tell us one interesting thing that you discovered from reading the personas and maybe or answering the questions. So, any key takeaways?
Yeah, under the, sorry, it's really loud. The skills section. So in this case, we were looking at Zablon, the early career designer, OSS novice, and the skills, graphic design, UI design, UX design. And my guess is those are the things that this individual said are their skills, but maybe more one than the other. And so when they say I do UX design and then you ask for kind of capital D design,
Right.
they get scared away because really they wanted to draw some icons or pick some better colors because those are deliverables. Those are lower key designs, and those can be done in a few hours. You don't need to talk about them. You don't need experience of the project. You can just kind of deliver them.
Yeah.
So the UX design might be something that is listed as something that they feel comfortable doing, but when you actually ask for it, might not actually be what they enjoy doing or have experience doing.
Really interesting, because UX design is quite, and like design research is often like as much as it is a design skill, it's like a interpersonal skill, especially within open source that has its own set of like cultural norms in how to interact with open source. Often like designers is that the persona that's also like an open source novice?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're going to come into that having an understanding of some of the types of design, but none of this is how open source functions. And so really quickly, those kinds of people realize, oh, there's this whole set of like practices that open source goes through that I had no idea or preparation for. So some of the things that can be missed in a lot of open source projects are like, this is how open source operates, because a lot of open source takes it for granted that people coming into open source already knows like that we work in written issues and we maybe meet a little bit, but you might never meet somebody that works on an issue. So these are some, and comment threads can be sometimes 50 comments long, and that's normal. That's sometimes surprising to designers for sure.
You want to go? You went first. Okay. All right. So it is all right. Okay, I analyzed a person who was an early career designer and complete open source software novice. What we figured out is that for a rather small project, it would be difficult to onboard a person who's would do all the heavy lifting for the design, especially if they're just learning the ropes, a newbie. The good thing is we found is that he's book smart, so to speak. He knows the theory, has little practice. So, but one of the big problems we found that is looking to make a career, and it will be difficult for to make a career out of a small project. So what we thought would make sense would be to introduce him as a sort of consultant, but being the idea is, okay, I want to make this to work like this or look like that. And they could verify our work, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, and This would also help him to ease in
Yes.
in a project. Well, he would feel like he's valued, his input is important, and yeah, that's our read on the Zabon.
Love that. There's like some keywords there about valuing, like that, make sure that they're valued, make sure they're supported. It's one of the things that is absent in the design space in open source is that community and like volume of people, like numbers of people that can play that supportive role. So we find it really hard to find each other, designers in open source. Like we often, if we know that we exist, sometimes we've never met each other. And it's not often that we go to like open source spaces. It's more often we go to design conferences. And then if you're like at a design conference, like I do open source, all the other designers are going to be like, what? So it's really hard to find each other. So what you're doing there is making sure that it's like an inclusive, we know that you are coming in with a certain level. These are the ways in which we can help you onboard better, which is honestly like a credit to the entire open source ecosystem, not just your project. So it's a good overall contribution. Okay, folks, I'm going to hand over to Abhishek. In just a second, I'm going to very quickly take you through one part of this board before I shoot off to go get my plane home. But there is a number of slides on how to engage with open source design and how to submit what they do and how to submit contribution requests and jobs to open source design. So just in case you are curious about what they do. And then the other thing here is a lot of things that I've gathered as good first design issues. So these are good issues to create on any open source software project that are always going to be good first design issues. So you've got something called a heuristic analysis or a review, a user experience review of the tool. Never a bad thing to ask any designer to do. There's guidance out there for all designers on how to do this. They don't necessarily need, quote unquote, their hands held to be able to perform this. Super useful for any open source software tool. Interface inventory to find all those inconsistencies with UI. This is another guided process that was created, I think, by Brad Frost, whom created Atomic Design. Creating a design system or a sticker sheet, we used to call it. Empathy maps for users as well. So these are all great, good first design issues, and they don't necessarily ever need to be closed. You can always receive contributions for these. And I will hand over to Abhishek.
Awesome.
Presentation, which is incredibly rude of me.
Okay. So we have been talking about a methodology to approach how to include, your contributors and make your product more available to your users. There are so many different ways to do it, but what we are trying to cover today is like a method to the entire chaos, right? So in the same vein, like designers try to include everyone. When we say everyone, it means all the people who it's supposed to include, all of your users, contributors, could be developers, right? So with like value proposition and user personas, these are just some of those methods that we use to learn about the people who we want to include and try to include them. For example, there was this terminal-based tool where there was a compromise in the usability, accessibility of the platform, simply by like making it more accessible to people with impaired like visual sense, color blindness, or visually if they're impaired. Just by changing the choice of colors, you can make it more accessible and make it inclusive to them, right? It's a simple change, but when we think about tools like Terminal, it feels like, what can we do about this, right? There's no room for improvement and there's no scope to better things here. So the approach to that is not to make your own experience the universal experience. Like if I'm able to access it, then everybody can access it in the same way. Like it happens, right? If we know a path to get somewhere, then we feel like, oh, everybody can figure it out. It's easy, right? Just because we know it doesn't mean that everybody can know it. And the whole idea about this design process is to put ourselves out of the comfort zone, out of these perspectives that we know ourselves, and understand the other people's perspectives so that you can solve for them and make it inclusive for them. So it's going beyond just solving our own itch, but also making others a part of it. And here's like another example that on the screen you see there is a loader. I took some time for me to see this, but people are like users are generally they tend to see loaders somewhere in the middle of the screen or up top of the screen, but it's placed there, which makes it slightly difficult. It's a very small example of how design can help, but just to make it like tangible for you all, some of the ways that you could try to change this is like making it more conspicuous where it is, or changing its position to somewhere users already expect it to be. Like if they expect it to be at the top of the screen, then you might as well move it, you know, at the top of the screen. So we've talked a lot about like how designers make people feel included in the process and product. Let's also look at how can we make designers a part of the FLOSS experience. And so here are some of the challenges that designers face when they try to approach an open source project, when they're trying to contribute or when they're trying to like participate in a project, right? So you will also observe like there's a trend right from starting to getting involved. For example, where can designers find the right project that they care about? Maybe your project is something that they care about, but how can they discover it, right? That's the first step. Think of a user who's just Googling on, they're just looking for a project with terms like open source project for contribution, something like that. And your project never shows up on any of the lists, right? Then how do you make it discoverable to them? And that's solving one part of the problem to include them in the process, right? And even if you say that they were to find your project, where do they start, right? Do you have like good first issues labels or whatever process you want, like a README or an induction in person or a conversation that you've had? So think about how can they start? How will they figure out easily that they should contribute to your project? And then maybe even thinking about like, is your project easy to set up? Will they find installation guides? Or even if they were to find installation guides, um, will they have all the prerequisites? So, and the list goes on, right? Like for them to keep coming back to your project, they might question, is design valued in this project? Right? And how inclusive is design within this? It tends to be like designers tend to value when their contributions are seen and responded to, respected. So maybe there is a governance or there is some process there for you to make them feel like their contribution is valued. And then when they're started working on the project, do you give them timely feedback, right? Or credible, valuable feedback? Because in some of the personas, you might see that some designers might be there to learn and some might be there to contribute. So you also have to like figure out what kind of feedback you want to give them. Sometimes you can give them heavy duty stuff and they'll be happy to take on the challenge. Sometimes you might want to pair them with somebody who knows, you know, and you can think of all of these questions in your user terms also. We'll come back to that as well in an exercise. So yeah, I mean, these are some of the challenges. I think I'll move forward in interest of time. And there is one, so this is a very interesting exercise which designers generally do to figure out the pain points of users and to solve some of those challenges. It's called user journey mapping. Let me give you an example. Um, so you have the personas. So what you can do is like it generally happens with a conversation with the user. So there are different touch points in the user's journey with your project, right? You can define one of those journeys. For example, in this example, the scenario is that this person is reporting at Olympics and they notice censorship and surveillance around Uyghur participants. So there are different touch points for that scenario. For example, when that incident happened, when there was an inquiry, they moved to action, and when they did their investigation, things like that. You can translate that for your application and think in terms of like your user first finding your app platform. They discover it, then they start using it. So that's like your onboarding process. They try to maybe navigate through it, and they maybe face challenges with documentation, right? So there are these different touch points. You can write them down here in the touch points part. And this entire user journey is broken down in these parts, like what happened. The first thing is like what happened, for example, if the user is trying to start using your application. So then you can say, the user was searching for an e-voting tool, um, right? And what so that's an incident. And then how did they feel about it? So when they tried to find your application, were they were they confused that they couldn't find it? They were kind of sad, not finding anything, not finding a solution, or maybe they were very excited that they did find your application. um, and then what did they think? So there must be some thoughts running in their minds. For example, in this case, when this incident happened, it's like, what's going on here, right? And I should get my team or um, my contact with I should contact with my workplace to inform them of the incident um, and cover the story. And then you also want to look at what or who was involved. So who are these different people that are involved? In some cases, in your example, it might just be the user, that one person, who is trying to figure out the way around the tool. Or in this case, like there is Chinese government involved. There is the whole tabloid, right? The social media, and it doesn't need to be like a person. It can be a platform. It can be inanimate objects as well that are involved. Um, so you need to figure out all of these things. Now, the reason why we do this is a lot of times you will hear it from various product teams that users generally do not give you feedback by themselves, right? Like when you ask them what's not working, or if you want to like learn more about them, they may not be able to articulate exactly what's going on. A lot of times they may say, "Oh, it's great. We love this product, right? It's working out really well for us." Or sometimes they may say, "No, I hate it. It's bad. This doesn't work well." But then, how do you figure out actionable things? Something that you can solve to make it more accessible and usable. And for that, you need to learn about their behaviors in a more nuanced format. And this can be done to this can be done after you've solved some of the major problems, because this tends to go on like a lot more nuanced. So if users say that this documentation was hard, you can solve those bigger problems first and then try to figure out like, let's observe these user behavior, let's talk to them, let's see where are those detailed points of failure. So yeah, I think let's take 10 minutes to for the users that you have been thinking about for your platforms, and try to create like a user journey map for yourself. We have some um, worksheets. Um, can you help me? Pass it on? Okay. So you can use this by there.
Swatch.
I mean the market.
Oh.
That's such a mess.
True. Yeah, you can take.
Yeah.
You can take.
Let me know like if you have any questions right here. You've heard of it?
Is there a list of e-voting systems in Wikipedia? And you that's a new. It's already then.
Just one more thing, like it doesn't need to be all the challenges that you're like setting up in touch points, but it can be an entire journey. What we generally designers do is we mark with these stars some of those unique points that need to be solved. So like the entire thing can be a process, but it's at this point that we saw some challenge and we need some action here. So we use these stars to mark those important points. And when you're sharing out, you can just share like one of those incidents that you think were like the highlight of your discovery in problem finding. Yeah.
So first touch point, you have a wiki. The homepage. Okay. They came to homepage. What did they see?
They see the picture.
Okay. Is that all they need?
And then after this,
Which was good. Did he learn to? Did he find out why this would good thing?
Do you want me to zoom in or something?
yes.
Do you want me to zoom in?
Because
Okay, all right.
which has impact session. So the different kind of sections and what could access to
As a person who was designer and an architect, do I want to read all of this? Or is there? Can you make something involved, please? So keywords like maybe.
well, that's a homepage.
Yeah. This is not how I read. This is what I choose what easy. I can.
So you sort of
Personally, when I go into a page, I need to be on.
need that somewhere. That's basically, that's
Yes.
the book.
Yeah.
That's the symbol.
Yeah. This
And
is
then from there, you can have links.
because
Like that's the big book. So that's
if
here.
you okay, imagine
And
I'm a
then-
designer, but I'm a tired designer. It's just Friday evening. I just want to. I feel like I might be interested, but I also feel like we're maybe getting it confident. But this homepage is completely with all my interest. I'm not yet.
Mhm.
How will you make me consider that I might give some more time to this? And the first thing you do is this is why it's important. This is what you can do. So if I can do something, but I don't care about, for example, animals, animal filter, and I care of animals, okay, I'm not. So in this case, I will just make things I care about better. And it needs to be completely seen. That would be like this. So yeah, like now,
One of the benefits.
well, you scroll like 5 times, it should be, if that's the benefit, we feel like it should be.
Because there are many benefits.
No, yeah, that's the difficult thing. Like you need one thing that's going to get people to do. And to me, what I found interesting was that the broadcasting app is on your own device. So you're not sending the data into a server somewhere where government can do something like that.
Yeah, it's really not the same, but there are many opportunities.
So sometimes, but that is the cool thing. It's not your competitive. It's not what you do better at.
It's
It's what you do.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is, well, how are we different or better than others?
Yeah. Because this at this point, do I even read about you? This is the thing we have to solve first. Do I even care to look at what's in the screenshots?
So imagine-
That's what the simplifies, right?
Yeah, but
The screenshot applies.
no,
No.
sitting from here, I have no idea what it is. I am. If I'm looking at video player, oh yeah, video player, cool. In this case, it's text. I read a lot of text.
So imagine I come to you and I'm like, I'm better than that guy. What the fuck? So I may be better at something, but you need to be interested in that something.
Yeah.
Before you wonder about better.
If he's a better welder and I need a
Designer.
designer, I don't care if he's a better welder than someone. Like I just. So this is the first thing. All right. Okay, let's assume that one others will be stuck here. So I feel okay. What happened? I saw a lot of text. How I feel confused and bored. What did I think? This is not for me.
Okay.
What if there was involved? I'm not here. All right, right. So let's assume that this is a voting system that respects something. All right. Let's assume that this is what happened. And okay. Now, okay, I'm on board. I want to contact you, for example. That second contact. It's IRC chat. What happened? I saw a link to IRC chat. Suddenly, what is IRC? Confused.
I mean, I did know that a better. Like I would talk. I generally first go look at the picture.
Okay, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I like those at the top.
and put a icon. Because when I'm lossing up, I'm not sure I
The
forget
GitHub.
the GitHub icon.
Yeah.
Because when I see the GitHub icon there, okay, I see that is actually the first thing that's open source. I don't even need to find license somewhere. I just see the GitHub icon. Damn, this is from me. I can
And
clone
I
it.
feel
I
like
can-
I feel like above the screenshot you need a short sentence, like whatever you wrote.
Yeah.
That needs to be there, and then you can have the screenshot.
Okay. Is GitHub your communication channel? This how you talk to you, or is this just source?
One of the things.
Okay. Fair enough. Actually, yeah, this will be one contribute. Here's the reading part. It's fine. This is no standard. Okay. Now I wanted to contact you. Are you responsive? Do you reply in a week or
Okay, commit to one day.
okay? Let's pick up on that. How did you feel? I feel frustrated, and I didn't feel that you were desperate, so you answered me in 2 minutes.
Well, like overnight, because it's straight away then you feel.
Exactly. This is not. Yeah. Especially if they contacted you during the nighttime and you answered in the nighttime, like, oh, that makes them think. Okay, I think this is how it works. Okay, the next point is they want to actually do something. They find okay, there's a source, do something. How do they know what to do? Do you have a list of tasks? If you
Yeah.
1 more minute.
okay, because were you on the workshop where they were talking about how to sell your ideas and such? Okay, so this is the part where the next steps, because if you have to write them a motivational letter, it better be paid work. if you already say that, hey, we want your contributions, this is what we would like you to do. We think you might be interested in doing.
Okay, let's start the share out.
Already think whether they want join in or not lead in the project write something, because if they're introverts, they would need as much information as possible before they write it. Otherwise, they will feel like, why, I don't know, they might feel afraid even to contact you because you're a cool guy, who brought a cool software, they don't need other people. I will just do trouble to them. But if you give clear parameters, they might feel less afraid. So, okay. So I think it's the idea is you imagine that you are, let's say this is,
All right.
imagine, okay, I'm scrolled.
Yeah, I think let's do a quick share out, and then that's really awesome to see. I mean, let's do a quick share out. You can just pick one instance that you want to talk about, and then yeah, we'll kind of wrap it up. You have the mic if you want to begin.
No, no, you,
Oh no. All right. Do we need to give the positive or the negative example?
Whichever works.
Okay. All right. Let's get the positive. Okay. We have our designer. He has come to our homepage and he has seen the description we previously wrote. So now he has a clear idea why is it there. It also has a link to GitHub with a GitHub icon, so he instantly knows that this is open source software, and he's probably welcome to contribute something, probably. So he figures out what it is from our page. He goes to the GitHub page. He sees that there are tasks that we might give him, and clearly defined, like, hey, we need some help doing this. We need, for example, we have an issue with that the users don't understand how our product works step by step. Can you please test it as a complete beginner and give us a feedback? How did you feel about it? And they already have a clear idea what to do, and they don't need to contact our project manager to do it. So they already, when they would like to write us, hey, I read your statement, what's it for? I want to join, and I saw the task, and this is how I felt about it. So they have already a conversation started, and they have already given us a valuable contribution, and hopefully this will lead us into a prosperous cooperation. Thank you.
Oh, that is wonderful. You can, yeah, I mean, the designer can do the testing themselves, or you can pair them with a user who they can do the testing with as well. Like, but I think that's a good description of task.
I'm glad you had a positive and optimistic one because we went the other direction. And this is pretty much based on my own experience. What happened? A designer will reach out, and how did you feel? Optimistic and happy and excited that somebody with that skill set is interested in taking part. How did you think? At that point, thinking about encouraging the conversation and starting the back and forth and starting to go a little more in detail about what the task is or what the feature is and the mindset behind it. What or who is involved, designer and an individual from the project. And I guess the conclusion of the scenario isn't really listed here, but kind of a sense of maybe overwhelmed from the designer standpoint, or maybe it's bigger than they thought, or more of an investment of time and effort than they thought. And the conversation just kind of fizzles out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to just leave you with some of these questions. Like I said earlier, this is entire exercises kind of about putting yourself out of the comfort zone and figuring out the challenges. It's about learning something new. So how does your chosen contributor differ from your own experiences, right? Because you were running with your experiences, but now there is this user or your contributor person who thinks differently. Did any specific issues come up that you hadn't noticed before? Maybe, you know, like the things that you pointed out were some of the issues that you didn't know before talking to these users. Was there anywhere on the contributor journey that your contributor faltered? And how can the process of user contribution be improved to encourage non-traditional contributions, which is kind of coding? But so you've been looking at designers. So I think that falls in this category. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna quickly share a few things, share a few resources with you. Like there is this guide that we developed at Superbloom. It is basically working with privacy and security focused open source tools. And we learned, we built some of the resources to help developers do user testing, do research, and also synthesize in their own, like how they can do it by themselves. Then if you are also keen in learning more about the user perspectives of designers working in open source, then there is this diary studies, which is like designers working in open source captured over multiple, like 10 weeks. They captured their experience of working on the project, and it kind of answers what do they think is a successful contribution, what are the challenges, how can they feel more valued. Those are some of the perspectives that you learn about a designer working in open source. And then there is also this resource that is for deceptive design. These are like some best practices and guidelines to counter like deceptive design patterns. So you learn about some patterns and you'll figure out like how you can avoid them. And then there is there is one of our funders that funds Superbloom is like Open Tech Fund, and they have a lab, secure usability and accessibility lab. What they do is support open source, especially in like internet freedom and security space, to help them with usability, accessibility, and security, like assistance. Like in case you think your project is not usable enough, and you'd like some extra support, so then you can write to them and apply for some funding, and they'll help you connect with teams or give you like funds to carry that out. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have today.